Welcome to Silent Service. My name is Will Diesel. I'm so happy you're here, and I know Matt is too. Today, we're going to talk to you about business, finance, entrepreneurship, everything in between. And it's truly a mentorship session, and you're more than welcome to join us for now, for the duration of our podcast. So stay tuned for more and enjoy the episode.
I have to, I've sent you the request.
Approve.
All right. Looks like we're recording.
Cool.
First ever.
I'm awfully excited. But yesterday, my family, they were missing me a little bit. I was just excited and I started working heavily on social media for Silent Service. So we have a nice Twitter account, a nice Instagram account, got a
Let's
couple
go.
followers. So,
Well, why were they haggling you?
oh, well, you remember a few weeks ago, they were like, Will, you work hard during the week. On the weekends, you should spend some time with us or doing some fun stuff. And I was like, this is fun. I'm doing fun stuff, but this is fun to me.
That's what the weekends are for. Having fun in the way that you would like to have fun.
Yeah, and I'll never forget, Matt, you were like, my mom, it was one of my first weeks working with you or being mentored by you. And she was like, Will, why don't you just go outside, do something, get off the computer? And you were like, what else would you be doing if you're not bettering yourself? And I was like, well,
From time to time, I can get a little intense. That may have been one of those moments. But in reality, why would you just want to relax and sit there and do nothing? What do you gain?
but I think active rest is important, you know?
I completely agree. I mean, it's like the topic of discussion from last night.
Yeah.
But we each find rest in a different capacity. Rest for me might look a little bit different than rest for you. Actually, tell me what rest looks like for you. I'm curious.
I really enjoy active rest. I'm not a huge movie buff, but when I pick one that I enjoy, I'm locked in. So that's definitely active rest. Last night, by the way, Matt and I lead this little youth group on the side. He kindly invited me to join it. He runs the show. I do what I can to help. No, it was good. The kids were talking about how they rest. For me, I don't agree with one kid who said running. Running is not restful to me. Just spending time with, Jesus calling in the morning or with some scripture or meditation and kind of just kicking it on the couch for a little while. Not too much, but a little while.
Sure. Yeah, I remember Jim Rohn, who's one of the philosophers that I've looked up to, who had once said, if you rest too long, the weeds will take the garden. And it's something that I've continuously have said to myself. But in certain ways, it's led to burnout. So from time to time, I look at Saturday almost as like a personal development day. And I take great pride in the rest that comes through the personal development focus, if you will.
You know, it just happened to me, Matt. I'm so used to, for all the listeners, I'm so used to every time you speak, grabbing a pen. And I was like, wait, maybe I don't have to do that. Because the point of this, of
We're
silent service,
recording, baby.
is to memorialize, yeah, everything that I'm blessed to hear from you, other people get to listen to as well.
Well,
But
I appreciate that.
oh yeah. Did I tell you back in at Rollins, my second year in, I tried to start a podcast called Genuinely Honest?
No, you didn't. Did you really?
I did. That's why the look, by the way, everyone, this was entirely Matt's idea, Silent Service. I'm just
False.
along. No, it
Not
was.
true.
It
Oh, I don't
what
see it that way. Is
what
that how
I
you see it?
well, you said I would like to start a podcast, and I was like, I've always wanted to have to do that.
Okay, well, let's rewind a moment. I think I
Okay.
had said something along the lines of, I wish I had a way to memorialize some of our conversation so I could share it with my children one day. And whether that created podcast, I don't know. But when you presented the topic of silent service and what this could be, I was like, all right, let's go.
Yeah, man. And then your lovely wife was like, you and Will might have to ignore each other for the mornings at least on those days. And I was like, I'm not sure if I can do that. But for silent service, I'll do that.
And
Here we are. And so, Matt, I mentioned earlier that I wanted to chat with you about compound interest, because with silent service, we're talking about religion, business, finance. We're talking about how to better ourselves. Just mentioned Saturday should be a self-development day. But as I've thought about it more, I'd love to take more of a generalized approach to finance. And it's funny because you mentioned Jim Rohn. He is a part of one of my questions I have for you. But before we do get deep into it, we have to start with MEPS. And for you listeners, this is something that Matt introduced me to. MEPS is an acronym. It stands for How are you feeling mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually? So typically, for each letter, you say one word, which relates to how you're feeling. So, Matt, I'd love to hear MEPS, your MEPS.
all right, let's start with mental. I would say I'm feeling ready. Mentally, I'm ready, especially after a great weekend full of family activities. Emotionally, strong, physically energized, and spiritually full. How about
Amen.
you?
Amen. Real quick, when are you not ready, Matt?
When I'm in the middle of a family event, when I'm with my
Yeah.
children, when I'm with my wife,
Yeah.
when I take the business hat off and I put the family man and superhero dad hat on, those moments.
Right. And, one of the reasons I was, so excited to hear about this opportunity in silent service with Matt is I don't recall a single time when I asked Matt a question and he replied, I'm not sure, or I don't know. He always has the answer. And I feel like your kids, Matt, are to benefit from that, which is cool.
Well, I certainly don't see it that way. That just tells me that I have tremendous areas to continue to develop growth within, right? Because I shouldn't have all the answers. I know I don't have all the answers. So I hate that I come across that way. So I really appreciate you sharing that because I'm, attempting to meet it with curiosity and try to look to see why it's perceived that I have the answer.
What a phenomenal answer that was. Just
Well, I
like,
mean, who wants to be considered to be a know-it-all, right? Like I don't have all the answers. I have some things figured out.
I just saw it a little bit differently. It just seems like you're very modest, obviously. But so my MEPS, mentally, I I'm feeling sharp. I'm feeling sharp. Working most of the day, feeling nice. Emotionally, I'm feeling supported. I had a nice weekend with my family, spent some time with the kids at the church, and physically I'm feeling strong. I was up real early, saw Terry in the gym this morning, felt good. Spiritually, I'm feeling peaceful. I am feeling good. Just happy to be where I'm at.
Yeah, that's great. For those that are listening in, Will and I love to share MEPS prior to getting deep into whatever it is that we're going to be talking about. Because if he or I know that we're not in the best place mentally, naturally we'd help shape our interaction. So if Will's not having a great day, or I'm not having a great day, like we're not getting to get into some serious topics of discussion. So it's a helpful way just for us to be able to check in to better understand how we're doing individually, as people. Sometimes we lose sight of that as we interact with others. How are you? Okay. It's like, are you really okay? And that's why there's different dimensions to be able to ask how someone's doing mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually.
That's crazy you mentioned that, Matt, because I've been planning out other episodes, and one of them is, you know, talk to me about the question, how are you? Why do we always say that? And why does everybody just assume everyone's going to say good? And it's almost weird if you actually answer honestly. You know, we say within our what we do is you don't even have to say to be honest because you should always be honest. So if I answer you, oh, I'm doing well with a happy face, but I'm actually doing terrible, it's not so cool. But we can
Right.
get into that at another
No,
point in
yeah,
time.
yeah, I completely agree. But you do bring up a valuable point. And these are some of the topics of discussion that Will and I have had over the past few weeks that we wish we would have captured. And one of those topics is an individual saying, to be honest. An honest individual shouldn't need to say, to be honest. I mean, think about this, Will. If someone came over to your house And as they're leaving, they look at you and they're like, I didn't take any of your silverware. I definitely did not steal any of your silverware. I did not take any of the silverware. Well, what are you thinking? Right? An honest person would not need to say, to be honest. So there are specific, we'll call it vocabulary that should be eliminated from most vocabulary, if you will.
Yeah. I think it's important to question that because, maybe that's one small flaw in society. Not saying that there are a lot, but maybe that's one.
You know, as time has gone by, and with greater uses of artificial intelligence like ChatGPT, people have become less impeccable with their word. And the specific meaning of words have become loose. And that's not necessarily how I was taught in business. My mentor always told me, be impeccable with your word. The very specific choice of words that are selected do matter. So don't take it for granted. And, my wife in arguments knows I'm the person to focus on a very specific word that was used. So I'm all about that. Be impeccable with your word, almost to the point of annoyance. So that's something that I definitely know that I need to work on. However, on the other end, I do think it's something that society should perhaps take more consideration into, the specific choicing of words.
Right. Kind of like if you're in a discussion with your significant other, there's a difference between I'm sorry and I understand with regards to what you may have
Completely.
done wrong.
Completely. And then you
So,
have a tremendous difference between sympathy and empathy.
well, if it's okay with you, Matt, when that time comes for me to get married, I may just ask you for some advice. All
You got it.
right, cool.
You got it. You're gonna make one heck of a husband, man. And the father that you're gonna make, oh baby, just watch out.
Oh man, it would be crazy to have a little Will running around with his
The children, by far one of the greatest gifts that God has ever provided me with. However, you do
men.
lose some freedom and flexibility.
Right.
All you parents out there know exactly what I'm talking about, but they also understand that there is no greater gift. Period.
Yeah, I've heard some wise things from parents. Once you have kids, your life is no longer your life, it's actually your kids. And you're only as happy as your least happy child. What do you think about that, Matt?
Wow. I've never heard that before. And I like it. As I think more about happiness within a child, and I don't think that this is what you and I were planning on discussing, Will, but I do think that your environment does play a major role in shaping who you are and your personality, as a young adult.
Yeah,
And I don't think that unhappy parents are necessarily going to create very happy children.
right.
And when you think about happiness, happiness is a choice. I think about this all the time, Will. When I come home at the end of the day, I have a choice as to how I'm going to walk through that door. I could have my backpack slung over my shoulder, my head down, walking in, don't say anything, just another day at the office. Or I can bust through that door with energy. Honey, I'm home. Announce to the family, to my kids that I'm home, right? It's a choice. It's a choice to put behind me the things that I dealt with during the day.
Right.
And it's a choice to be happy. So, one of the greatest questions that I have ever heard is how does one create happiness from nothing? And it's a question that I repeat over and over again to myself because that is the question that we're all attempting to answer, is it not? How do you create happiness from nothing? That is the question.
Yeah. I think the secret to life is not necessarily trying to become happier with more, like materialistic goods. It's about how to become happy with less, right? Simplicity is
Detachment
is what we should be after. Less is truly more. Like,
until you get into deep relationships, until you get into serving others, then I think more is a little bit better.
makes sense. Now, Matt, I so appreciate listening to you speak and your wisdom. I do have several questions here that have been on my mind for the last couple of days. And just because it relates to what we've been talking about off the bat, in just a couple of words, Matt Tomorrow, does money make you happy?
Will Diesel. It's an interesting question. And I would say that there was a certain amount of money that was required in my life to be able to provide for peace and security. However, it was ultimately the skills that were developed that leads to the peace of mind and understanding that anyone could strip me of my name, take all of the capital that I have access to, all the people that I know, the network, the relationships, and plant me anywhere in the United States. And I have confidence, just given my skills, the knowledge that no one can ever take from me, that I would have a million liquid within a 12-month period of time. And that gives me great peace. So, no, I don't necessarily think money in of itself creates any level of happiness. Money is simply a tool, it's a resource to be able to help one accomplish whatever they've set out in this world. And many times you've heard over and over again, many times money just reveals truly who that person ultimately is. And that is true. But in my circumstance, Will, and I'm not saying that this was right, it's just what was. I had an unhealthy obsession with money growing up, an unhealthy obsession with materialistic or materialism, if you will. And again, I'm not saying that it was good, that it was bad. In hindsight, I do think it was bad. It was my life. And after I was able to obtain some level of financial security, my life began to change based upon purpose and mission. And then I just started to think about how many people just never get to be in that position where they're thinking about purpose, mission. Like, what did God put me on this planet to do? And I'm just so blessed to be in this position at a very young age because I've been in the right place at the right time with a lot of work, but a lot of luck at the same time. So, overall, to answer your question, no, money does not create happiness. However, I do need a specific amount of money to be able to provide for my family and to be able to provide for the lifestyle that we've become accustomed to.
Right, right. I so appreciate that answer.
But let me flip it back to you for a moment.
Sure.
What do you think about money and happiness and the equation?
I I do genuinely want to observe a substantial amount of wealth, but for the right reasons. I believe that once an individual experiences any kind of wealth, it just emphasizes the kind of person that they are. So if you're a good person and you have some money, you become a better person. If you're a bad person with some money, you become a worse person. And for me, ever since I was a little kid, I've just always thought it would be the coolest thing to tip a waitress that was kinder than she had to be. I've always wanted to do that. I've never really gone out to eat a whole lot. I like to save and do what I can when it comes to compound interest because my dad talked a lot about that to me growing up and reading his books. I learned about that. But no, I mean, having luxurious items, I don't believe it will do too much for me. I think just being able to share, you know, assets with other people to make other people's lives a little bit better, including my own, that's what I would be after. So I think it would make me happy. Yes.
Like money solves money related problems,
Yeah.
unrelated to money problems, like health, as an example. And then you and I were talking about this quote, last week. I can't remember who specifically said it, but the quote was, if wealth is lost, nothing is lost. If health is lost, something is lost. If character is lost, everything is lost. And I've thought about that a lot ever since you and I discussed it. And it's so true. A rich man has 1,000 problems, But someone who's incredibly sick only has one. And they'd give up every dollar that they had just to be healthy, perhaps just to walk another day or to hold one of their children one more time. So when I stop and think about priorities, I do think about my relationship with God. I do think about my relationship with family, but I also think about my health and my relationship with myself, with my body. And in understanding that if I don't take care of myself, I won't be able to take care of others. And in a way, you do have to put yourself first. So many of us just neglect the body because we get busy, because it's easy. But the best things in life are not easy. The best things in life are very difficult. They are hard. And so frequently we choose a very easy path when we know that that path will lead to regret later in life. And this is just about discipline, is it not?
I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think discipline is happiness. And I think just as Warren Buffett says, to achieve what you want, you don't have to be smarter than everybody else. You just have to be more disciplined.
It's so true. But I mean, like, think about what someone who's listening to this might think when you hear discipline equals happiness. When most think about discipline, I bet happiness doesn't come to mind. In fact, let's just pause a moment. Like, well, how would you define discipline?
I would define discipline as doing the things that you have to, doing things that you have to do when you don't feel like it.
Okay, I agree with it. That is what discipline is. My definition is doing what one does not want to do to obtain a desired result.
Hmm.
But think about that
That's
for a
better.
moment. Well, I mean, just think about this. Like, why does one do push-ups? Because they're after a desired result. And the end goal of that result, that gain, is worth more than the pain that they will experience through the discipline. And frequently, or not frequently, but perhaps from time to time, you may have heard that someone's not really willing to change until they hit rock bottom. And I've thought about that. And it's like, what does that actually mean? And what it means is that the pain of changing can't be enough as the pain of staying the same. So one will change once the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change that they'll experience through the discipline required. It's just a weird concept to think about, but I agree. Discipline equals happiness.
Yeah.
The more disciplined that I am in my life, the happier I am.
And arguably the better you are for your family, for the man upstairs,
I
for
completely
yourself.
agree.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I've heard Ed Milet talk about this a lot. And Ed Milet has the view that when you pass, because we all will, you get to meet the version of yourself that you could have been here on earth. And if you get to shake hands with that individual, and it is a mirror image of yourself, you're in heaven. If you don't recognize this individual, you're in hell because you now have to live with an eternity knowing that that's who you could have been on planet Earth. And I think about that all the time. Even this weekend, when I was tired after a long beach day on Saturday for one of my daughter's friends' birthdays, we're beach in Sarasota, Florida in summer is very hot, mid 90s with UV index 10, 11, 12. And here I am at home after a shower, wanting to just lay down and relax. Meanwhile, my son wants to build this toy that he got for his birthday 2 weeks ago. Sitting on the couch, I had a choice. I could stay sitting here, close my eyes for a few minutes, or I could get my butt off the couch and go build the toy with my son. And I thought to myself, that version of myself that I'm going to meet, what would he have done? And that spurs me to action all the time. So that's what I think of when I think of the discipline. I think about who I could be. I think about the version of myself that I will meet. And I want to meet the mirror image of myself when that time comes.
For everybody listening right now, now you understand why I'm so blessed to be able to listen to Matt tomorrow each and every day. Well, just phenomenal stuff, really. I mean, think about how lucky his son is too. I mean, just pretty wonderful if you ask me. Matt, I do have a fantastic quote that talks about this. Well, the title of it is Life Paradox. I want to share that with you towards the end. However, I was thinking about where we're at, and I did want to talk just a bit about financials and what this looks like for some people who are curious, silent service to achieve what you want financially. Um, but geez, just real quick, I have this burning question that doesn't relate to that either. But growing up, I went to summer camp every single summer for 2 weeks to a month, depending on the year. And there was a plaque in the middle of the woods, and I would walk past it every single day. And the tradition at the camp was you tap this plaque, and this plaque said, "Show me your friends, and I'll show you your future." Do you believe in that?
I do. And I believe in it further. Show me what you're reading, and I'll show you your future. I do believe that.
You see, guys, Matt has taught me that reading incessantly is what seems to be one of the greatest cheat codes there is to attract and get what you want out of your profession, out of life. And my gosh, I mean, he's recommended me to read this one book at the moment, and it is just fantastic. But
Well, I mean, think about it. If someone's lived on this planet for 80 years and they have invested 100,000 plus hours into their craft, and you're able to digest their entire life's experience in an hour, hour and a half, you're telling me that you don't have interest in standing on the shoulders of giants?
I certainly do.
But to hear about people being bored today, with books, with the internet, with I don't know how one could ever be bored.
Yeah, that's just fantastic. Well, we'll have to talk more about books in the future. But with regards to, you know, finances, right? We mentioned Jim Rohn, or you did a little bit ago, and I've been listening to Jim recently, and he told me, for those that don't know, because I haven't shared, I'm a relatively young professional. I'm 24, and been listening to Jim to understand what my investments should look like. What percentage of my earnings should I be taking and investing? And Jim seems to believe that 15% is a good metric. I hear more and more these days that you can't save what you spend, and you have to live beneath your means in order to achieve what you want, which is not only financial independence, but to purchase, whatever it is you want in this life. So, Matt, if you wouldn't mind sharing, granted, we don't share any financial advice here, really, but what's your take on that?
I share a similar sentiment where if you are capable of living within one's means, you can't help but get incredibly wealthy if you allocate capital into vehicles that grow and compound. And given the amount of runway that someone like you will has, you have the ability to compound over decades and decades. And that's one of the more important inputs within a formula that requires three inputs to determine ultimately to understand how much money one will have over a period of time. So, what I mean by that, time is one of the major factors. Someone who has a long period of time to compound doesn't need a very large starting balance when it comes to the amount of capital that they have access to. So, time is the number one equation. Number two is the amount of capital one would start with. Naturally, someone earlier on in their career is not starting with a substantial pool of capital. Someone later on in their life may have a large amount of capital to start with. However, they don't have a long time to compound over.
Right. And
The
especially with
third,
student loans, you have to take that
correct,
into account. Yeah.
right. So, number one, you have time, which I'll call the runway. Number two, you have starting capital. And number three is the rate of return. How much interest is this investment specifically providing. Let's say, as an example, you put your money into a Bank of America CD, a certificate of deposit. You'll probably get somewhere around 4 to 5% today,
Annually?
annually. Now, if you were to invest that capital into an index fund, say the S&P 500 as an example, that has historically produced an average annual return of around 10%, you'd be looking at obtaining close to double the return compared to a CD.
But it's
Well,
riskier.
it is riskier because you could lose your capital.
Right.
Where in a certificate of deposit, you cannot. It is FDIC insured, very limited risk, but lower return.
Mhm.
All investing is, at the end of the day, the assumption of risk. That's what investing is. Investments, that promise or provide a very high return naturally are very risky and more speculative. You can go for a risk-free treasury note today for a week that's obtaining a little bit above 4% on an annualized basis. Risk-free. Or you could go towards the public markets that do have risk associated with them to strive for a higher percentage of return. However, when it comes to these three inputs, again, there's time, there's starting capital, and then there's that annual rate of return. The beautiful nature of these inputs is you only need one of them to be large. So let's assume you're starting with a very small amount of capital, but you have a very long runway with a modest rate of return. You won't be able to help other than get wealthy if you're able to live within your means. Stated differently, if you have a very short runway, not a long time to compound, but you're starting with a high capital base and you have a decent annual rate of return, you'll still end up wealthy. You're actually starting wealthy. You have a large capital base. But now let's
Right.
look at the third input. You have not a very long runway. You don't have a lot of money, but you're able to get a substantial return. You'll still get to the promised land. So it's one of these three inputs that one needs to focus on. And there's a gentleman who I love, whose name is Monish Pabrai. He's a value investor. And Monish speaks on behalf of universities, institutions, and he shares a lot of his philosophies. And one of his philosophies is that life is about how many doubles one has in terms of compounding their capital. So for example, if I had $1 million, how many times can I double that? Is what Monish specifically looks at. And there's a simple rule. It's the rule of 72, commonly known in finance and investing, where you take 72 and you divide that by your annual rate of return, which will determine how long it takes for your capital to double. So let's take 72 divided by 7.2%. That's 10, right? 72 divided by 7.2 is 10. So therefore, your money would double every 10 years if you were achieving a 7.2% annual rate of return. Does that make sense, Will?
It does make sense.
So
And
if you were to take 72 divided by 9, that's 8.
8 year, yeah.
So it would take 8 years to double. Or let's go way up and let's say you were compounding at 26% a year. Your money would double every 3 years,
Fantastic.
right? So naturally, one would want a higher rate of return. But keep in mind, generally speaking, a higher rate of return comes with greater levels of risk.
Right.
So one needs to be careful in speculating and going after very large returns. But when you have time on your side, which will you have time on your side, one can begin thinking not in a linear fashion, but logarithmically. And that is to the power of 2, because that's what money is when it's doubling. Meaning, if your money doubles, it's 2 to the power of 2. If your money triples, it's 2 to the power of 3. If money quadruples, it's 2 to the power of 4. White quintuple, 2 to the power of 5. So my recommendation to you, Will, would be to memorize the logs 2 to the power of 2 through 2 to the power of 10. So if you were to think about this, it's 2 doubling. So 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, and so forth.
Yeah.
But when you memorize what these log forms look like, if you say I doubled my money 6 times, I know that's 64 times because it's right. 2 to the power of 6 is 64 times.
Right.
So
Right.
6 doubles is 64 times.
Uh-huh.
So if you were to start, as an example, with $10,000 and you doubled that 6 times, that would be $640,000. And I'm able to do that math in my head real quick.
Did somebody else tell you to memorize the logs way back when?
Monish Pabrai.
Monish Bhabrai. Man. Did he come to Rollins to speak or something?
He did
No.
not. I wish he
YPO.
did. He
YPO.
he he did not. But I've learned a tremendous amount from Monish, and he himself claims to be a shameless cloner, which means I am a shameless cloner to the power of 2 because I am cloning a shameless cloner. So Monish and I now have that in common. We're both cloners.
Why reinvent the wheel if it's already made?
Exactly. So let's
Yeah.
play a game for a second.
Okay.
Well, you mentioned you're 24.
Mhm.
Give me an idea as to when you think you would retire. What age?
Well, you see, Matt, I thought about that this weekend and I actually don't know because, well, I'll give you a number, but I seem to like what I do recently, so who knows?
Okay.
Um,
Give me an age.
okay, I'll give you an age. I'm thinking, let's call it 65.
65. Okay. So you're 24 today, which means you have 41 years to compound capital.
Hmm.
Okay. You have 4 decades.
Hmm.
Let's just round it to 4 decades to keep math simple.
Hmm.
Give me a number that you think an average 24-year-old should be able to save in a single year. At
Hmm.
24, right? At 24, what do you think? Is it 500? Is it 1,000? Is it more? Is it less? Won't hold you to it. It's just for a game.
Let's say an average 64, 24-year-old's making 60 to 65. Let's call it 60. Take 10% of that, 6,000. Let's just say 6,500.
But remember, you got after-tax dollars as well.
Let's say
So,
5,000.
okay, let's just go with 5,000.
Yeah.
That if you're fortunate enough to be 24 years old, living under your means, where you're able to put away 5,000 after-tax dollars, we have 4 decades to compound $5,000.
Double it every single year.
Well, I wish if we were getting 100% rate of return, we would double every single year. So, what do you think is an appropriate rate of return to expect over a 4 decade period of time? We could go incredibly low with 1%, which a high yield savings account currently, promotes 4 times that. So I don't think that's appropriate. Or
Okay.
you can go up to, we'll call it, 15 to 20%, which is like a private equity return, which is on the other high contrast, the high extreme. So what do you think a reasonable, we'll use that word, reasonable rate of return would look like on an annual basis?
On 5,000 across 40 years. 41.
Well, again, the S&P has historically produced an average of 10.
Hmm.
And just to be clear, that's an average. That's
Hmm.
not, it has produced 10 every year. That is an average of 10. Some years minus, some years substantially greater, like the last 2 that we lived through. So
Right.
what do you think an average rate of return would be?
In
We'll go,
total,
yeah, we'll go more conservative. Just give me the percentage on an annual basis that you think you'd be able to compound at.
5%.
Okay, so we'll take 72, right? Because we are using the law of 72. 72 divided by 5 is
Hmm.
14. Okay, it's 14.4. I got a calculator sitting next to me, so I'm not doing public math here.
Hmm.
We have 40 years to compound. We have 14 years where we're doubling. So you'll experience 3 doubles over that 40-year period of time. So you have 5 to 10 to
20
20, right? You following me?
to 4. Yeah.
So that's how one would think about this.
Right.
So if you have 3 doubles It's 8 times your 5,000,
Hmm.
right? So you
Yep.
would have $20,000 40 years from now. Okay.
But I think the
But that's one
overarching,
year. Oh, hold on. That's
sorry.
one year of investing 5,000.
Yeah.
Next year, what do you think you could put away? Hopefully a little bit more.
Yeah.
5,500, maybe 6,000.
Yeah. Probably six, I'd say.
Okay. Six.
And then
Now we're talking about,
gold add 1,000 each year.
that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
But you begin stacking up so much capital 40 years from today, well, that you would have no clue what to do with it. And that's using an overly, abundantly conservative 5% rate of return. If we were to use the S&P at 10, just to keep it simple, that's doubling money every 7 years. You have 40 years to compound. That comes out to be 5 doubles. So we're talking about 32 times your money. So the 5,000 that you put in is now worth 175,000.
Sounds fantastic, Matt.
And that's 1 year. 1 year at 175,000.
Right.
Next year it'd be another 175,000
And we're
if
not
you
even,
invested another 5,000. And then the year after another 175,000. You get my point? Like there would be so many millions of dollars that you would not know what to do with it. The
and
reason why most don't focus on compounding or even saving is because no one wants to get rich slowly. But that is the proven and evidenced way to generate substantial amounts of wealth and capital.
that's why they call it the eighth wonder of the world.
It is, but it's not just about money. Well, it's about relationships. I mean, think about how relationships build and compound over time. Think about a family, how it compounds over time. Compounding truly is the eighth wonder of the world, but it's not just about money. And that's what people miss. It's about playing long-term games with long-term people and developing deep, trusted relationships. That is one of the elements that's missing when one thinks about how to compound. It shouldn't be only just, we should only be talking about compounding when it comes to money and finance. We should be talking about how do we compound our relationship with God? How do we compound our ability to serve others? How do we compound our ability to be a steward, a fiduciary to those that we love in our lives? That's what we should be focused on,
Amen.
not just financial returns. Financial returns, great. Hallelujah. Love them, right? I'm not going to say no to more money as long as
Who
I have
wouldn't?
a plan or a path, to use that money.
Right.
And
Right.
that's what I've been on a journey on over the past, we'll call it, 6 months, is understanding that capital follows mission, not the other way around. And so frequently, people are seeking capital, seeking large sums of money. For what? They have no idea what to do with it. And for so many, when they walk into large amounts of wealth, like a lottery winner, as an example, you read the stories of how lives are just taken down because they're not ready, they're not prepared.
But just for a second, they have everything, and then their life
And then they
capsizes.
realize that that's not everything. Once you climb to the top of the mountain, you realize nothing's actually there. Like you get there, you get this large pool of money,
Right.
and then you realize that work in of itself was the goal. That
Yes.
was the goal. It was work. Work was the goal. I hear Alex Hermosi talk about this all the time. And it's not, to push religion on anyone, but he says, in the beginning, what did God give Adam before Eve? God gave Adam work to do because we as humans would wither without work. We were designed to work. So work, hard work, in of itself is the goal. And don't forget about luck, how much luck plays into different aspects of life, business planning, regulation changes, advancements in technology, weird weather patterns. Like we can't ignore luck. That's why I don't necessarily like when someone measures their success based upon the amount of money that they've accumulated. I think it's a shallow, way to look at success. But then again, each and every one can determine success for themselves. And that's that beautiful, beautiful nature that God gave us of, having free will. We get to determine what success looks like for each and every one of us. Will, if you were telling me, if you're like, hey, look, success looks like for me, smoking weed, getting high on the couch, eating Cheetos all day, great, because you, right? I have no problem with that. But if that's you and you're sitting over here telling me that you've been suppressed and you're looking for a break in life and you want more, you want to become more, right? Like that's not something that I can necessarily respect and get down with. So
Right.
like the know thyself, I absolutely love for full firm believer, behind that. But hard work in of itself is the goal.
Yeah. Right. It's like it reminds me of that Chinese proverb you shared with me. I don't remember the name of it, but it was about the guy who he had made it to heaven, or so he thought, and he just had everything he could ever want, right? He had the people, he had
Yeah.
all the wonderful food, he was able to do all of his favorite hobbies, go on these wonderful vacations, right? And ultimately he got tired of it. Let's call it 3, 4 months in, he was like, man. I'm starting to resent these things that I love doing. I'm not sure why this is, but I'd like some work. And this master, this God figure came to him and said, "Well, you see, that is the only thing you can't do. You cannot work, but you can do anything else that you want, but you cannot work." He said, "Well, I don't love that." Well, that's because you're in hell, sir.
It's true. Like I
Yeah.
mean, just think about how many people like just wither away after they retire. They
Yeah.
lose their purpose. And I don't like that concept of like retirement, right?
Right.
To think about, people living their lives for the weekends and living their lives for something that they will then do, right, when they retire. It's
Yeah.
like, why not just make that a part of your life right now?
Yeah. Did I tell you, Matt, after I finished up for the listeners, I'm recently coming off a year of service in Montana, but coming back, I got to start this new job and it's great. But family members, friends, they started asking me, like, how's your new job? I say it's great, but I try not to think of it as a job. I would literally say this. I try to think of it as a hobby so that I want to go each and every day and so that I'm not living for the weekend. Because I had friends that all they cared about was Saturday and Sunday. And I was like, I don't want to live that way.
Yeah, I agree. I share the Warren Buffett mentality where I'd like to tap dance into work every day because
Yeah.
I'm just so excited and I love what I do and I
Yeah.
love the people that I'm around.
Yeah.
So, so much. And, what I really hope to capture over our future conversations, Will, is how to effectively manifest the life that one wants. Because everything that I have in my life, like I wanted, everything that I wanted, I have. And I was able to utilize the law of attraction, self development, compounding knowledge, relationships to be able to build the life of my dreams. And it's time to be able to help others learn how to do the same thing.
So cool. So cool.
And it
Thank you.
starts with you, man.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt. I just love it. And um I
No,
actually
I'm
had
just so excited with the new holding company that we're building and the path that we're going down. We have so much to talk about. This is
yeah,
gonna be this is gonna be just such a fun journey. Like I'm really, really excited. And for those that are listening, I appreciate you listening, but Will and I had a pact before we even started this, and we said this isn't something that we're gonna do regardless, as to whether someone's clapping for us or not. This is something that was important to Will and I to be able to document some knowledge and philosophies, not only for my children, but for Will's future family and for all the employees' lives who we're going to touch, throughout this process. So we're just so excited about the future and we're excited to be able to share some of the knowledge with each and every one of you.
so excited. I have this note before we started, Matt. I wrote down this is for, you know, person we work with, person we work with. I wrote all their names, just I don't know, some inspiration. And
That's awesome.
I would like to finish each silent service episode off with a quote of the day, if you will. And today's quote of the day stuck out to me. It's actually on our Twitter account, but it's entitled Life's Paradox. It says, "When I had nothing to lose, I had everything. When I stopped being who I am, I found myself." Paul Coelho. Hopefully, I'm saying Paulo's name correctly, but something to think about. And Matt and I will sincerely be looking forward to you joining us next time.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. Also, since you showed or shared that from Paulo, he wrote the book The Alchemist. Highly recommend. Phenomenal read.
Wow. I've heard of The Alchemist, but haven't had a chance to read.
It's a great book. Great,
Looks
great book.
looks like I'll be hitting the bookstore this weekend.
I'll bring a copy for you tomorrow.
Thanks, Matt. Alrighty, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your morning, your evening, your afternoon, and thanks so much for joining us. Bye bye.
Thanks, guys. Take care.